Hello everyone, I'm Olga Maslovskaya and I'm an assistant professor in social statistics and demography at the University of Southampton. And this is, here I'm going to present joint work together with Peter Luchtig from Utrecht University. And we conducted an investigation of non-response bias and representativeness in the first cross-national probability-based online panel, CRONOS, in the UK context. So the main motivation for us to conduct this work was that, well, there were various probability-based online panels introduced across the world, and in the UK context, there were Natsan panel and CRONOS panel. Two main approaches to invite sample members exist: push-to-web approach, which requires sampling frame that allows identification of all eligible members of the survey population, but this approach is very, very expensive. Another approach is to invite participants on the back of a probability-based face-to-face survey. But there are potential problems with attrition and resulting representativeness. In CRONOS, the second approach is used. Not much is known about representativeness in CRONOS up until now, therefore we thought it's very important to investigate it. So the main aim was to investigate representativeness across waves and between 3 countries in CRONOS online cross-national probability-based panel. So just a couple of words about CRONOS, if you don't know about this survey. So CRONOS was collected on the back of the European Social Survey Round 8. 3 countries took part in CRONOS: Estonia, Great Britain, and Slovenia. After completing the ESS face-to-face interview, those who were 18 plus were invited to participate in 1 10-minute online survey and 6 20-minute online surveys over a period of 12 months. And data collection took place between December 2016 and February 2018. So here, this table shows stages of data collection. So it starts from the gross ESS sample, stage 1. So stage 1 and stage 2, they're specific to ESS, European Social Survey. And then from stage 3, we see various stages of data collection for CRONOS, with the real CRONOS starting at stage 6, wave 0, and then wave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what is important to mention here at the stage 3, there is a change to the data collection which was used for ESS. And those who were 15 and 17-year-olds were excluded from CRONOS, and also Northern Ireland was excluded from CRONOS in Great British context. So here we can see the sample sizes at each stage of the data collection. We can see obviously the sample sizes are reducing, what we were expecting as well. And for the first stage, we can see that there is gross ESS sample, but also gross CRONOS sample, which are 2 different things. And we discussed what the difference was introduced by removing those who were 15 to 17 and Northern Ireland and Great Britain. So now a couple of words about the methods which we were applying for our analysis. We employed R indicators, which are representativeness indicators, which were developed and introduced by Barry Scouten and the colleagues. They were designed to measure the degree to which the respondents to a survey resemble the complete sample. Large indicators imply representativeness, and the R indicators vary between 0 and 1. So the closer it is to 1, the better when we talk about representativeness. R indicators do not provide means to identify subgroups for targeting and prioritizing. However, partial R indicators helps us to do this. They are designed to evaluate the contribution of a specific variables or a category within a variable to lack of representative response. So we were able to obtain an unconditional and conditional partial R indicators on variable level and then within categories. So the larger the indicator, for conditional partial R indicators, the higher the role of this variable in reducing the lack of representativity, as it has the higher impact on bias. And the same for conditional partial indicator within categories. The larger the indicator, the larger the impact of that category on non-response bias. However, what is very important to mention here, that if we want to discuss conditional partial R indicators in detail, we first need to look at unconditional partial indicators, as they will give us the indication if the conditional partial indicator, if the specific variable or specific category are actually overrepresented or underrepresented. And we can we can look at it only if we have information about unconditional partial R indication. This is what we obtained as well. So we fitted logistic regression, standard response propensity models at each stage of the data collection, and our control variables were age, gender, education, and region. So here, the first graphs show respondents at each stage, and for the CRONOS, those values, they're very close to response rates. So what is interesting here, if you look at Great Britain, the response rates in Great Britain and respondents at each stage are the lowest in comparison to other two countries at each stages of CRONOS. But when we look at our indicators, we observe the completely reverse picture. So we can see here that when we look at CRONOS starting at stage 6, we see that in Great Britain, the R indicators are the largest at each stage of CRONOS in comparison to other 3 countries. And this is very important. It tells us that we do indeed need to go into further investigations if we want to talk about representativeness in detail. So what we did first we obtained partial conditional R indicators at the variable level. And the results suggest that education has the highest impact on lack of representativeness in all 3 countries. Also, age contributes to the non-representativeness in Estonian and Slovenian context as well. So these two variables, they play the most crucial role when we talk about representativeness in the 3-country context. As I mentioned, the main limitation of partial conditional R indicators at variable level that we don't know what specific categories are contributing towards the lack of representativeness. And therefore, we looked at the partial conditional R indicators at the category level. So first of all, as education was one of the main variables contributing to the lack of representativeness, we looked at the education. And as I mentioned, just to look at partial conditional R indicators is not enough. When I will do interpretation of the results, I have also the results for unconditional R indicators, and then they help me to assess the picture in a wider sense, because we know which specific variables are underrepresented and which specific categories are overrepresented. So in Great Britain context, the category no education or primary education, which is gray line, is the most underrepresented and contributes the most to the lack of the representativeness in CRONOS survey. And what is important to mention here as well, that in the UK context, those who have those with masters and PhD are most underrepresented, but at earlier stages. They are most underrepresented at stage 3 and stage 4 of the data collection. So when we look at Estonia, so in Estonia, there are 2 main variables which are contributing the most to the the lack of representativeness, and those categories are masters or PhD, and by obtaining unconditional R indicators, we know that this specific category is overrepresented. However, the secondary and higher level is the variable which contributes to the lack of representativeness in Estonia, and this specific category is the most underrepresented. So when we look at the Slovenian context, we see in Slovenia similar pattern than we observe in Estonia. Those with secondary and higher education, this is the category which is most underrepresented in Slovenian context. And we can see this is exactly the same pattern across all stages of the data collection in Slovenia. And those who have bachelor diploma or bachelor degree or equivalent, they are the most overrepresented category. So then let's have a look at the age. And the results suggest that in the UK context, the most underrepresented group are those who are age 80 to 94 at the stages, CRONOS stages 6 to 10. But then also we observe that those who are 18 to 29, they are most underrepresented in stages 10 to 12. So at waves 4, 5, and 6 of CRONOS. So when we look at Estonia and Slovenia, in Estonia, those who are 90 to 94, and this is our blue line, they contribute the most to underrepresentation at all stages of CRONOS. And with those who are 60 to 69, contributing most at stages 3 and 4 to underrepresentation. In Slovenia, we observe patterns similar to Estonia. But what is very interesting, so the difference there between Slovenia and Estonia, that at the stages 3 and 4, it would be those who are 18 to 29 who are underrepresented. But for the stages of CRONOS, those are who are 80 to 94. But so then that was our results for age. So we can see that those are older ages, and in the UK context, those who are the youngest, they are the most underrepresented categories, which contribute the most to the lack of representation in the UK context. So when we look at gender, we see more or less balanced profiles between males and females across time and across countries, which is quite reassuring. So as we don't have much time, I cannot show more results. They would be available once in the working paper. So before I talk about the final conclusions, I would like to mention the limitations. So here in the presentation, I was only able to show you our indicators due to the constraint of time. However, we know that our indicators can overestimate representativeness in specific contexts. For example, when we observe low response rates and low propensity variation. And in this case, coefficient of variation, CVs, would work better. They were also used in our analysis, but just not presented here. So what was very important limitation, because when we started working on the project, we were hoping that we would be able to look at differences by devices used in different countries. However, absence of paradata for device used by respondents to complete survey for wave 1 and wave 2 was the main limitation, so we were not able to do this work. I'm really hopeful that I would be able to do this work when CRONOS 2 becomes available. So it would be very, very important to obtain those paradata for CRONOS 2. So in just at the end, a couple of words to conclude. I really hope I managed to convince you that it's very important to look at our indicators to have more complete picture of data quality. Differences in representativeness across countries are relatively small. Response rates are different across countries, as we saw, but also differences are small across time within countries. This is the overall conclusion. Partial indicators show country-specific contexts and are very useful for targeting and prioritizing of specific groups. I didn't show you results for regions, which are very important for specific contexts because they're not comparable across the countries. And the results for the United Kingdom are consistent with results obtained from other social surveys in the UK, including Understanding Society. Thank you very much. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.